Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin can and string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, there was a game tonight in which Carson Wentz played admirably and eked out a loss against a very, very surprising Baltimore Ravens team. And it's not even like the fifth biggest piece of news today.
I wasn't even like Carson Wentz airmailed in the first quarter he airmailed a near pick, and I wasn't even willing to tweet about it, right? That's how crazy the weekend was and how crazy the news dump was right before Monday Night Football. I was just like, you know what? I'm on one. I'm not going to tweet about this egregious overthrow. I don't think I started tweeting about the game until 3 minutes left in the second quarter.
Yep, there were other things to talk about, and we will do so as well in just a moment. But before we start, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. Really hope you guys are doing well. The Vikings won. We will talk about that. Despite the fact it still feels like a loss, the Vikings won, so we're just going to all have to accept that. But otherwise, again, thanks you guys so much. We are brought to you by you, the listener. We are supported by you. We are ad-free from you. And if you would like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate to the show there for $3.50 per month. You get access to bonus material. You'll actually be getting a bonus episode here in the next day or so, all you Patreon people. So look out for that. Also, you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and check out the new Arif Christmas line. Sure. And check out the Christmas socks and shirts and stuff. A lot of you guys have gone out and bought it. Again, appreciate it. We're not making a bunch of money on this or anything. It was never our intention other than to have Arif just be dressed up in images of himself from here on out. That was actually the goal of the podcast before we started the podcast.
Right. And longtime podcast listeners will know.
Yeah, we've talked about this for years. We just wanted to turn Arif into a fashion plate of his own graven image. And that's what we're doing. So norsecode.threadless.com. We've got the original shirt, the original stuff out there, and then the new Christmas thing. So check that out. Also, we are doing a live show. We are doing a live show here on November 4th over at Ireland's Four Courts. Start time sometime between about 7 or 8 o'clock. Over at Ireland's Four Courts in Arlington, Virginia. So check that out if you are in the area. We'll be happy to be there with you. The Nova Vikes are going to be bringing a bunch of people, and come on out. Come on, check us out. We'll be giving away a free ticket to the game, probably some merch as well. So check us out on November 4th over at Ireland's Four Courts in Arlington, Virginia. Arlington, Virginia, of course, is just right across the river from Washington, D.C. So, and actually, we got a question as to why we were doing it in Arlington instead of actually in Baltimore proper. And it's mainly because this is such a big Vikings bar, and this group kind of congregates out of it. So there's not exactly a big Viking scene in the city of Baltimore, unfortunately, but there are plenty of Vikings transplants over in the Washington, D.C. area. So this is some place that they tend to hang out at. So come on out on November 4th. Check us out. We will be having some fun. And maybe you can get into an argument with Arif and maybe take a picture with Norse Code Nessie. Also, if you have any James Madison gear, we may also be needing that because it looks like we're going to homecoming that weekend, which is astonishing. This is peak Norse Code. The fact
incredible.
Yeah,
so we'd actually had not even considered that there might be a James Madison game that weekend when we were talking about where to do our live show. And we decided on Baltimore. And then after we had 90% decided, I think, on Baltimore as the away game that we were going to go to. And a lot of that has to just do with, the ability to find a place to record and have some Vikings fans at. After 90% of that deliberation was done, I think it was you, James, that was like, hey, James Madison plays near there. Do you think?
Yeah, that's less than a 2-hour drive.
You think they might have a game that weekend? And I was like, oh yeah, let's find out. And it was homecoming.
Yep, it's homecoming weekend for the James Madison Dukes. Your Dukes.
For my Dukes.
So if you want to say hi over at the James Madison University, whatever the name of their football stadium is, or if you know this, you're practically an honorary degree there, or have an honorary degree there. We will be hanging out at homecoming, so check us out. This is
at Bridgeforth Stadium.
This is. I'm glad you were able to just roll that off the tongue and not have to Google that. Or maybe
I have to Google that,
or you just have that in another tab.
That doesn't sound like me. I've got 59 tabs. If I had had it in a tab, how would I have found it?
I suppose the
the logic is unassailable.
Is this like the Dave Chappelle thing of how can you sleep if you're high on crack? Like, forgot how that worked from the Chappelle show. Anyway, we are going out to homecoming, so check us out. We're gonna have a little bit of fun out James Madison way. So that I believe is going to be on November 6th. I think that's the Saturday. So that should be interesting. All right, let's get into it. And the breaking news that we have to talk about is not necessarily Vikings related, but it is still football related. It's still the thing that people are going to be talking about tomorrow. More so than the Vikings game, and that is that John Gruden resigned this evening as head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. He has resigned due to the leaked emails, the contents of which are incredibly damning. I believe that you have the line from Adam Schefter tonight as to who exactly Gruden offended.
It was a clean sweep.
Quote.
For Schefter. Yeah, a clean sweep of people he offended. I mean, he did kind of nearly hit the cycle. It was homophobic. It was sexist. Obviously, there was racism. We'd heard about that earlier. It's interesting because I just want to hit onto the quotes about racism because he did have to go in front of press after that news leak and talk about that. And I've seen 3 different quotes about how he feels about the amount of racism in his body. And it is, he doesn't have a racist bone in his body. He doesn't have a blade of racism, which I've never heard in my life. And he doesn't have an ounce of racism inside of him, which I have to know how many times he has had to explain how much racism he doesn't have inside of him for him to have so many different ways to convey that his body physically does not inhabit the concept of racism.
When you have when you have that many examples just on standby, you probably have a racist bone in your body.
Yeah, I would imagine that, you got to check, you got to run yourself through the racist x-ray, see which bones are racist, get that figured out and removed.
That is a difficult
the way
thing.
racism works.
Yeah. And I don't even know if the league's insurance policy necessarily covers that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely not. No, it famously a lot of gaps in the coverage, especially with regards to racism historically. No, so there's that, and so that's the language he used to describe a bunch of different people. He talked about Michael Sam in derogatory language. That's the first out player to be on an NFL roster. That's publicly out. That was drafted by at the time the St. Louis Rams. But he also talked about female refs and how much he hated them. He also responded, sarcastically to sexist memes about female refs. I think he commented on, or at least he definitely received and was willing to share coerced pornography, essentially coerced pornography of the Washington football team's cheerleaders. Everything that you can do, he did, apparently, according to these emails, except, I guess, according to Florio, there's more emails that the NFL was going to leak that might have been even worse had the Raiders not done something about it. Because I think within the NFL's powers, all the NFL could do is suspend him. And so the NFL was leaning on the Raiders to do something. And so they're leaning on him, included publicly releasing this stuff, which interestingly, they provided to the Raiders on Friday, which means that he coached on Sunday with the Raiders, the team, Mark Davis, who I have to stress, the son of Al Davis, one of like the historically most progressive forces in the early NFL. Like I can't stress that part enough. Mark Davis saw these and then, I don't know, maybe had an internal discussion, but did not meaningfully do anything that was public facing about this until when he learned that this stuff was going live on the New York Times. So then he holds a conversation, I guess, an hour before the story gets released. I don't know. And that's when Gruden, quote unquote, offers his resignation, right? Which I imagine is a means of recuperating some of the money without the Raiders having to be on the hook for paying their lawyers to figure out what money they can get out of on their guaranteed contract with him, etc. I imagine that was just kind of a way to make sure that both sides were out of less money than they might have otherwise been. But yeah, there's just like a couple of things I want to add on to this, which is that one, we're talking a lot about Gruden and we're talking a lot about people who are not in the league like Bruce Allen, but there are 650,000 emails that the NFL uncovered. And they found these emails with Gruden. Gruden's the only one that they've implicated that's currently in the league. I find it really difficult to believe that, first of all, that we're not going after any of the people that were also in the email chains, right? Because like if he's emailing someone all this stuff and they're not responding with like, dude, you can't be doing this. Yeah, they're on the hook like years, right? Because the first email, I guess, was in 2010, but we have emails like, as early as 2017 about this stuff, right? And there's more. Like I retweeted a couple of the different tidbits from the piece that describe some of the things that he did. There's so much. I didn't even go over all of it.
Couple of thoughts on this, and chime in here too, because this whole investigation started as an investigation into the Washington football team's many scandals.
Their toxic work culture. Yeah, multiple scandals, including the one involving the coerced pornography of the team cheerleaders.
Exactly. And has anything been released necessarily on that?
No. So my understanding is they're still conducting that investigation, but there was also another investigation related to this that they refused to make public, right? So they came to a conclusion about the investigation. Various members of the Washington football team were punished for it, but then they didn't publish the results of their investigation. But it also sounds like the investigation is ongoing. Like I don't really understand. There's a good piece from Jenny Vrentas over at SI that will go over kind of more of the context behind that investigation. But for a long time, there have been allegations of a history of a toxic workplace at the Washington football team, especially for women in the workplace, that toxicity extended to women covering the team. My colleague, Rhiannon Walker, for example, was harassed by a member of the Washington football team. But yeah, it's part of 650,000 emails. The vast majority of those emails have nothing to do with John Gruden, right? This is just part of that email thing that they found, the batch of emails that they found that they've released to the public. But they hired an investigator, Beth Wilkinson, who the league did not request a written report. And I think that's because they didn't want this report to become public. And so various members that were involved in the initial scandal that forced this investigation to come to fruition had already been published like a year ago, right? But now that there's like some pretty good evidence that there's a league-wide toxic culture among people who are like decision makers, right? Like the president of the Washington football team, or like big sponsors, right? Like or business executives that have a big role in football, right? Like so the executive director of the Outback Bowl, the CEO of Hooters. But the
CEO of Hooters being involved in this is truly wild. The fact that you can't even go out and get soggy wings somewhere without it involving somebody's Michelin-sized lips. It is just...
Yeah, can you imagine that the CEO of Hooters was involved in a scandal that has to do with regressive social attitudes? That boggles the mind.
It continues we just keep on going deeper and deeper into this. Yeah. The other thing that's wild to me about this was the scene at ESPN, because Adam Schefter comes on in the middle of the game, says his piece about John Gruden retiring. He's done.
Well, he's done. But resigning.
Yeah, resigning. Yes. John Gruden resigning, effective immediately, and then over halftime, you got to watch 3 ESPN talking heads, including Schefter, talk about Gruden's bad behavior and how the Raiders were forced to do something about him during his time that he was spending at ESPN. Like the emails that were being sent while at ESPN, this couldn't have wrapped up more beautifully in like an irony sandwich. Just, it was so perfect. And the fact we didn't have Mannings on to talk about this.
Yeah, oh my God, we missed a golden opportunity for Eli Manning to stir some stuff up. I mean, like, just poking, just finding ways to get people in trouble. We really missed out on an opportunity for Eli Manning to do that.
Yeah, and maybe they wouldn't have done it with guests. Maybe he would have just tried to convince or try to tell Peyton, like, hey Peyton, you've done a lot of stuff with him. Has he sent you any sort of emails that any sort of forwards that you want to share with us share with the rest of the class tonight?
Right. Yeah. Hey, do you think Archie Manning might have sent it? Like that would have been crazy.
Like, was Saban in on this? I wonder if Saban was in on this.
Let's get him on the phone.
Saban's had a rough weekend. Let's see if we can pile on him a little bit more.
Right, yeah. But like, at the end of the day, there's a good argument to get all of this stuff public. I think Mark Davis needs to answer questions about why he didn't do something on Friday, right? Because like Gruden had to answer questions on Sunday to a press corps about the one racist thing he said in the one email that was leaked, and they knew about all the other stuff. I can't express how nuts that is to me.
Well, it's a full on trickle truth situation. He was caught, but the only evidence that the press had at that particular moment was just this little shred, and so he was just defending himself on this one shred. He didn't.
I understand it from like his perspective. I think from the Raiders' perspective, it's just like you see, and like you're the Raiders, right? You are not like the tightest ship in the universe, right? Like you have never subscribed to the idea that you can run an airtight enterprise. You're not the Patriots, right? And you weren't the ones that dug up the emails. The NFL was. So now you have to trust that the NFL is never going to leak anything, which they never do.
Oh, that's never happened once. There's never been a random video of Ray Rice or anything. Yeah.
Right. So you get this on a Friday and you're like, all right, well, he's taking heat for the racism stuff. So long as everybody who knows about this keeps this insane news bottled up, he'll just have to take the heat for the one thing, say he doesn't have a racist toe or whatever it is, whatever body part that's not racist that he can talk about. And then we'll just move on. Right. And if we win games, it doesn't matter. Right? Like he called Roger Goodell the F word. Why wouldn't Goodell just be like, yeah, dude, you're out of here?
As it turns out, and not the F-bomb. He went homosexual slur on that. And yeah, they kept him employed for the weekend.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, I think the NFL will keep this bottled. They wouldn't dare.
No, that's the ginger is going to be fine with all of this. It'll be golden. All right, so we wanted to start off because this is going to be the thing that everybody's going to be talking about for the next few days. So you get a couple of talking points and or a little bit of a laugh on just the ridiculousness of it. And I don't want to include analysis from Booger McFarland or anything on this, but it does really fly in the face of the ideas that are posted even on the backs of people's helmets about ending racism, ending
the NFL
hate.
Has made like this huge. They actually even ran a commercial about them donating to the Trevor Project during the game. Like as this news was dropping, they had the NFL is gay, NFL is transgender, the NFL is for everybody commercial, right? Or I think it's football is gay, football is transgender, football, is for everybody. That commercial was running, right? And and then Booger McFarland talked about like the end racism in the end zones and all that, and how the NFL like has donated money to various anti-racist organizations, which like very few of us, I think, bought. Right? There's just like we all understand the game here; it's all PR, but like still, that's their public face.
Yeah, and you can't have one of the head coaches, especially a high-profile head coach.
Yeah, right.
Who's under contract for 10 years for an absurd amount of money, be saying this sort of stuff and have it be leaked out to the press. You have to do something about that on Friday.
Yeah, and I refuse to believe that Gruden and the people involved in the email change are the only ones. So we'll see what happens over the next week about this.
Like, what do you do if you're Mark Davis? Do you like have some assistant go down and talk to the individual captains of the team and ask if they want to play for...
Paul Nassib is on that team. He's currently the only active, openly gay player in the NFL.
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, what do you do exactly? Do you go to the individual captains and take a vote? Like, if you're going to play with them? Because even that's, like, not an okay thing to do here. You just take care of it. You just do it. You've lost the locker room at this point. It is...
Yeah. You've lost every level of the organization. Yeah, there's nothing you can do. You get him out of there. I guess promote the assistant head coach, which is the special teams coach. And I don't know, maybe they become the head coach next year. Or, I don't know, Benjamin Albright was like, they'll think about Dabo Swinney, which feels like an awful move from this perspective. But, whatever.
Yeah, as long as he's not Gruden and as long as he doesn't know how to send an email, sure. All right.
Good chance Dabo Swinney doesn't know how to send an email.
Yeah, well, that's part of the draw, I suppose. All right, so now that we've covered Gruden not being a high character person, let's talk about the Lions game.
Not a grinder, if you will.
Oh my, really? That's
why he's not a Gruden grinder.
No, he most certainly is not. All right, let's talk about the Lions game. This was a game that felt more like a loss than a victory, despite the fact that we won it. This was a game that was incredibly frustrating. This was a game that included the fans booing the offense on multiple occasions, including going into the end of the first half.
They were booing like random running plays. It was just like, oh, Alexander Mattison gets the ball. Get this out of here. We don't need to see this.
Well, I mean, they were booing second and long runs, which became a trope after a while because it seems like every time they're in second and long, they were running.
Yeah, it is second and run. Yeah, because like second and long, that's for running because the defense is giving you room. Second and short, well, that's for running because then you can get a new set of downs if you just get a couple of yards. Like that's what it feels like, right?
It's ridiculous. But this was a game that featured many moments that will live in infamy as far as we're concerned. But I suppose the thing you have to start with is the impotent Vikings offense, who managed to get Justin Jefferson over 100 yards receiving in the first half and then nearly forget about his existence the entirety of the second.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting, right? So like there are, we've talked about it a couple of times with Cousins and Zimmer about, the inability to get Jefferson involved in the second half. But I do kind of want to talk about the offense or the passing offense in general at first. Because it's difficult to get kind of a read, just at least from a casual watch. And I did a more detailed watch of the game, but from a casual watch, it's kind of difficult to get a read of Kirk Cousins' performance overall, right? Because you think, hey, they get Justin Jefferson 105 yards in the first half or something like that. Why doesn't he get involved in the second half? He's having the game of his life. The Lions corners just can't keep up with him. And, obviously you don't want Kirk to throw into like double coverage if it doesn't help or if Jefferson's not open or whatever. So you can't just say always throw it to Justin Jefferson, which is why I was watching, especially the second half in a little bit more detail offensively. But I just kind of want to I don't know anybody who came out of the game having a positive or negative impression of Kirk Cousins, which is weird because we've been talking about how bad the offense has been, especially in the second half, at creating and converting opportunities, right? And one of the issues that you could have had with Cousins over the past, 5 weeks, even when he was playing well, was the lack of deep shots. And part of that, of course, is, it's a quick strike offense. They're mitigating all the pressure that's coming from them. And with a quick strike offense, you just have fewer chances deep downfield. And in this game, I think they had 4 shots deep downfield, only 3 of which I think count because of penalties or something like that, which is more as a percentage of their attempts than I think any other game this season, which makes sense because it's, the Lions have the second worst passing defense in the league entering this game. We talked about that on the previous show with Jeremy Reisman. And okay, so maybe you want that, but like, I don't know that very many people came out of the game thinking about Cousins, like positively or negatively. And so I was just thinking, well, he wasn't that inaccurate. And I look it up and I know he had like a 70+% completion rate. And I was like, wait, also, I don't know that he had very many completions where the receiver saved him from a bad throw. Like there was that first deep shot to Jefferson where I think Jefferson did more work than Cousins to reel in the completion. And so you could say, he got helped a little bit on that throw. But for the most part, you had a drop from Jefferson, you had a drop from Thielen, you had a drop from Osborne that turned into a pick, right? And if you get rid of things like spikes, which obviously the Vikings, I think, had 2 of, but at least 1 of for sure at the end of the game, you get rid of throws where he was hit as he was thrown, you get rid of batted balls to the line of scrimmage, which didn't happen in this game, if I recall, and you get rid of drops. His accuracy rate was 90% in the game, which I feel like if that happens, and that's happened with Cousins in the past, right? Like this isn't the only game where he's had a 90% adjusted, accuracy rate. But like when that happens, either that's the product of a short passing game, but his average depth of target in this game was higher. We just discussed that. It was about 8.5, which is just a little bit below NFL average. Okay. So reasonably deep, throws, 90% accuracy rate, and he just doesn't feel like he had a great game. It doesn't feel like he had a bad game. It doesn't feel like he had a great game. And I think part of it is just because the points, right? Because KJ Osborne, I think the pick happens in the red zone, if I remember correctly. So they were right at the tip of scoring some points. And also, the running game just wasn't working, right? Occasionally there were penalties. It wasn't quite like the first week. But yeah, that offense wasn't there. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, so the offense was kind of rolling in the first half. And again, the offense has been doing well in the first, drive or 2 of the game. And then after that, it just doesn't seem to do anything. There's something to be said about game script and adjusting and stuff like that. But we asked Cousins and Zimmer after the game, hey, what the hell? It looks like that interception happened while the Vikings were on the 23. So technically right outside the red zone, but scoring opportunity. So, hey, what the hell? Why didn't you throw it to like Jefferson and Thielen more often, especially Thielen, who didn't get a completion? He got a target. It was a drop, but he didn't get a completion until literally the final drive, like until the game-winning drive. And they said that both of them said that the Lions played a lot more, kind of cover 2, right? And kind of, so like what ends up happening in this game is that the Lions' adjustment in the second half makes the defense look pretty similar, at least to my eye, pre-snap as it was in the first half. But in the first half, they rotated that safety down a little bit more often. They kept that safety a little bit higher in the second half. So it did end up looking like, a 2 safety defense. And typically you don't want to throw deep against 2 safeties. But I just feel like Cousins was a little bit too likely to turn it, like he sees 2 safeties and he tries to figure out what his short options are. And if that's the case, he's not going to be able to throw it deep, and it's unlikely that you'll end up with the ball to Jefferson unless he's a design screen. But there are a lot of instances where, there's 2 safeties, but I'm looking at it and I see people open, right? Like I see Thielen open kind of deep. I see, the Vikings are running. I think the best example of this is when the Vikings run something called a smash concept. We talked about it a couple of times because we talked about the Tampa 2 defense a couple of times, but that was a while ago. The smash concept is a corner route and a hitch route or some sort of underneath route, a flat route. A corner route is a route that goes straight up, usually along the numbers on the field. They usually go straight up the numbers on the field, then they angle out towards the sideline, about 17 to 22 yards deep at the end. So it's like about 15 yards up, and then you angle sometimes 45 degrees, but really based off the leverage of the defense towards the sideline. So it forms a corner. It's the opposite of a post route. So that route usually finds its way between, in cover 2, the underneath corner, and the on-top safety. Then underneath it, on the same side, you run an underneath route. So that's usually a hitch route. It can be a flat route. It can be something else. But it pulls that underneath corner towards that short receiver, right? Because they're in zone, so they're looking forward. So they see this receiver, it pulls them towards you. And that allows that corner route to flatten out a little bit and create a lot of space, and the quarterback throws that. It's a cover 2 beater. It was run a lot in the early 2010s when Tampa 2 defenses were really popular. The Tampa 2 was actually kind of originated in part to help stop that and also stop the seam routes up the middle by pushing the safeties out and giving them a little bit more space. Either way, the Vikings run a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. The Vikings run a couple of these smash concept routes or corner flat routes, right? These routes that stress that's underneath corner and make them kind of in conflict and always wrong. And when that happens, you throw away from the conflicted receiver, right? So, or you throw away from the conflicted corner. So if the corner cheats up to cover that flat route or the hitch route or the out, then you throw the deep corner route. If the corner floats up to try and take that away, then you throw the hitch. And there's trap coverages that take that away, and there's a bunch of ways that you can make it look like it's a cover 2, but actually you're baiting a pick on the corner route, and that's fine. But that's not what happened here. The Vikings run that route. It's a cover 2 beater. Your read is just that corner, and you throw it away from the corner, and you either get like 20 yards on the corner route, and then obviously whatever yak you might be able to get off of that. Or and Teddy was pretty good at that. And actually Cousins has been really good at the corner route too historically. Or you throw it to the flat route, get like 5, 6, 7 yards, right? And they do that, and he's always throwing the flat route, and I don't really understand it. So there are instances where the Lions are much more likely to be running cover 2 deep, late in the game, but there's still open receivers deep downfield, and so it just doesn't seem like a good answer to this, right? And the offense just not doing well is like. And sometimes you have free receivers running deep and Cousins is about to get hit and there's a pressure and it's not his fault. Like Oli Udoh gives up a pressure, I think, when KJ Osborne has a one-on-one in the end zone. He probably would have been the target. Ben Ellefson gives up a sack when Adam Thielen is deep. He's about to get 20 yards. So, it's not always Cousins' fault, but it just feels like there's a lot of missed opportunities there. Either way, it would have been nice to get Jefferson involved in the second half. There were opportunities. Cousins declined like 2 or 3 opportunities to throw to Jefferson in the second half, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 30, 40 yards here would have been a lot better, would have made people feel a lot better about the way that the game progressed. I don't know. It's just like you see these one-on-ones. You see a safety kind of get out of their zone. You see Adam Thielen running this corner silly. And Cousins, he's waiting and holding onto the ball and he's seeing pressure. Cousins' time to throw is 2.88 seconds, which is longer than it was any other time this year. But this guy just like wide open deep and he just throws it away. I don't know. So that's kind of how I feel about the passing offense is that Cousins played okay, but there were just so many missed opportunities there and Cousins, I think he was pressured on like 38% of snaps. So it's not as if he had like a very clean pocket most of the time, but it was also the Vikings have seen 40% pressure a lot. Well, and it wasn't at 40.
The running joke for the Lions was that this is a team with no corners and like no safeties. So
yeah,
what are you doing? Why are you not just feasting out here? Like the fact that Jefferson had over 100 yards in the first half was like, yeah, that makes sense. He should probably be putting up 200 today.
Yeah. And there were just like missed opportunities. Not as many as I thought there would have been on review, but there were a bunch of missed opportunities. And they're not all on Cousins. A lot of it's on pressure, right? But it would have been nice to see more. Cousins clearly is not the reason that the Vikings were disappointing, this late in the game. I think the play calling was a bigger reason. I think the run game was a bigger reason. I think the offensive line is a bigger reason. I think elements of the defense were a bigger reason.
Well, let's talk about the play calling because the play calling got a lot of boos. The play calling was very questionable. The play calling was ultra conservative against a team that couldn't defend the pass if it wanted to, and it ended up being a situation where the Vikings didn't score enough points. And eventually, if you give the Lions enough drives, they will score points on you. And that's what ended up happening.
The 49ers proved that. Yeah. I mean, the Lions can score points. I mean, Jared Goff is not great, but he does have a passer rating above 90, right? Like it's not impossible, right? So
my favorite stat for him was that this was like
he's got the highest passer rating of an 05 team ever, or something like that.
Well, that's good too, but the fact that this was not his lowest the yards per attempt of the year. But he's second to his own performance in like week 3.
Good Lord.
He is not doing well. I remember when everybody was saying how this trade was going to be great for both teams so it could give both of them a fresh start, and how Jared Goff was going to excel in Detroit.
Yeah, the only reason it'd be good for the Lions is because they got some first round picks. So
and it got them out from a contract.
Got them out, from a contract that they couldn't take advantage of. Yeah. But yeah, you give the Lions enough opportunities and they'll score, and that's exactly what happened. So on that critical fumble, which, man, 2 late game fumbles that one lost the game, the other one almost lost the game. And if the Vikings had lost that game, a 37-second drive, I don't think you blame Cousins for that, right? Like, pretty incredible that he was able to do that. I blame that more on the Lions than I do credit Cousins. I was watching the final drive, which is, it's only 3 plays, right? But like, I was watching the Lions coverage, and Thielen's catches, they were on the same play. Like, that's nuts to me. Like, which, I mean, that happens a lot more than you think. Like, what was it? Buffalo Right 7 Heaven, I think. Minneapolis Miracle. That was run 3 times on that drive, right? Like, the same play happens a lot because there's only so many ways you can get receivers to a sideline. But the Vikings run 3 plays, right? Because the other one was a catch to D.D. Westbrook. And 2 of them go to Adam Thielen, and they were the same play. And both times Thielen runs like a kind of a deep corner route, like the one I just described. And then he breaks in for a square in route, and the cornerback is just spinning in circles. He's just like a mile away from Thielen both times. And it's like, buddy, I know you're an undrafted rookie. Like, this is tough. And, technically, I guess Thielen was too, but this is not the same thing as that at all. Like, I know you're in a real tough spot, but he got you on the same play literally 2 plays ago. You gotta pay attention, man. So that, I think, was more on the Lions defense than it was on Cousins, but 2 good throws. That was nice to see. I am going to imagine that the reason the Vikings did not run another play was because that's what Zimmer wanted and not what Cousins wanted. So I'm not going to blame him for draining the clock right before the 49-yard kick. But they could have spiked it and run another play and had enough downs for a kick. And I think that was a pretty big missed opportunity. Now, obviously, they're out of timeouts, right? So you don't have your full playbook available to you, but that's a situation where obviously if you take a sack, you're out of field goal range and you screwed yourself and you're going to blame yourself for a loss. And I understand there's a huge risk here, but we discussed this like a couple of weeks ago that the percentage odds that you increase on a field goal make percentage go up by like 10% at that range, like from 49 to like 38. They go up tremendously if you can get 8 yards or something like that. And again, you can't necessarily always do that because you have to get to the sideline or the end zone. But they had enough time to run another play, and I felt like they should have.
The Colts the Colts trusted Wentz tonight to do that, and the Vikings don't trust Kirk Cousins.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like if he's the quarterback that's out there, right? That's it. That's your guy, right? It's just like you got a receiver with the case of the drops. If he's out there and he's open, you throw it to him, right? Like, it's the same thing. That's your quarterback. He's out there. Make him make plays that'll win you the game. He just did it to get you there. He can get you 8 more yards. So, like famously, he was able to get Tyler Conklin 6 more yards with 8 seconds left, right? Like, that can happen, right? So, and obviously they needed a touchdown to win. It's a little bit different. And that was actually, I think that reminds me of the touchdown throw to D.D. Westbrook. That was one of Cousins' worst throws. He was on the run. But, that's just kind of annoying, right? Because if that kick ends up short, which, mind you, it already happened in that game, right? A kick that ended up short. It would have just been like, look, obviously this is a Greg Joseph issue, but you should get the ball a little bit closer. But we didn't ask him that because we didn't ask Zimmer about that because we wanted to ask about like the 8 other things that happened in the game. But yeah, got to talk about the running game. Alexander Madison's vision is just not the same as Dalvin Cook's, but he is more athletic at this point, given how much Dalvin Cook is banged up. The issue in the final drive for him, the final rushing attempt that ended up in a fumble, he ends up declining the open gap that his reads should take him through because he notices that, if he goes there, he's probably not going to get a first down. It's 3rd and 7. And I'll talk about that in a second. But it's 3rd and 7. They run the ball, a normal thing that you do on 3rd and 7. And he sees a gap and he doesn't shoot it. And then he decides to instead bounce out. By bouncing out, he opens himself up to taking a loss or potentially get a first down. That's just kind of, that's a habit that a lot of college backs have that it's tough to break them out of. Well, they'll just bounce out if they see any mess. And they can either lose 2 yards or gain 20. That's just how college football works. And he thought he might be able to do that. And that didn't work out. And so he ended up taking a fumble and not holding onto the ball. And Zimmer mentioned today that that's actually exactly what happened. He mentioned that he was fighting for too many yards. And that's kind of how he characterized that. And he should have gone down, which obviously after the fact we can say that. But the running game overall, the run blocking really wasn't there. Both Rashad Hill and Christian Darrisaw, I'll talk about them separately in a second, had issues in the run game. Oli Udoh had issues in the run game. Ezra Cleveland had a couple of issues there. More of an issue in the pass game. Garrett Bradbury is usually a little bit better in the run game. I didn't particularly like what he did there. Just problems creating gaps. Obviously, you end up with that 48-yard run that was nice, but the Vikings had a 21% run success rate, which is like tremendously low. It's like your success rate on runs is usually pretty low because they're a negative expected point play. Like all other things being equal, passing plays are positive expected points, running plays are negative expected points. And it's just how you balance them is really how you interpret the kind of the risk reward of having too much of one or the other. But you don't usually get down to 20%. Like a good running team will have a success rate up to about 50%, unless you're the Ravens. I guess except today, where they didn't really decide to run the ball that much. But the Browns are a really good example. They're one of the most successful running teams of the past 2 years. Their run success rate's about like 48%. And I think that's third. So that's a really good running game. Average, you'll be like 35. Like it's not a hugely positive play, but 21 is like abysmally low. And a lot of that's run blocking, but Madison just did not take advantage of some of the opportunities he had in the run game. So that was kind of the issue there. And that was a big part of the reason that the Vikings couldn't get that offense going, is that they ran the ball a lot. They ran the ball in 2nd and long a lot. And they ran the ball in weird situations and they didn't run it well. So that's part of it. As for that like final run there in the end, the reason Zimmer said the reason that they called a running play, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? But like the reason is obvious, right? Which is you drain 40 seconds off the clock, you punt it, they have the ball with 120 left, and Jordan Berry's been like a pretty good punter, although he's not 100%, right? So I don't know how much I trust that, but he's been a pretty good punter so far this year for the Vikings. And you make them have to drive, hopefully 65, 70 yards, but probably 50 yards. Because at that point they need the touchdown. 50 yards for the, in a minute 20, which, I mean, the Vikings defense in situations where they put their opponent into their own territory, has been all right. This year it's been less because you have to include the 2-minute drives at the end of halves. But in the fourth quarter, it's been all right in those situations. But like, you get a first down, you win the game. Like that's it. Get the first down, win the game. So I thought that the coaching decisions there, or the playmaking decisions, play management decisions, I should say, were pretty bad. So that's what I think about the offense.
Boy, the fact that you're even just saying that the coaching decisions were bad is kind of an understatement at this point. It really did seem like this should have been a much bigger beatdown. It seems like it should have been a beatdown. This was a Detroit
were favored by 10, and they'd hit that by halftime, or I should say they hit that by 5 minutes left in the half.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they should have won by 20. They should have won by 20.
It is a weird situation to be like, oh, they didn't win by enough. Like, no, you don't seem to understand. This was a game that was painful to watch. This was just, and this was an offense that should have been able to do so much more. And coaching decisions and offensive scheming and everything, it just seemed like They didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Yeah, it seemed like they didn't know the team that they had, right? Like they didn't know that they couldn't really run block in this game. They didn't know that they didn't have Dalvin Cook in this game. They didn't know that they had KJ Osborne, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen in the game. And so they were really committed to, and I understand you've got the lead, you want to run out the clock, but that is like a, if they score twice, that's all they're going to get and we still win decision. Not, we're in the third quarter, let's run the ball. Like, you just score some points, right? You're on offense, score some points. It's very simple. Get points. I understand game management, reducing possessions, making sure your defense rests, making sure that you can drain the clock, reduce the total number of possessions, reduce their opportunities for being able to come back. I understand that taking more risks to try and attempt to score more points exposes you to turnovers in situations where you don't need turnovers, exposes you to lower time of possession in areas where you want to have higher time of possession. I understand all of that. I understand that there is a tactical reason to slow down the game, run the ball a little bit more. But if you're facing a situation where you're on 2nd and 1, and all you think of is running the ball because it drains clock, and you don't think about the fact that 2nd and 1 is the most valuable down and distance in the history of football, and that you can throw a deep bomb because defenses don't respect deep bombs enough on 2nd and 1. If you don't think about how valuable 2nd and 1 is, and all you think about is getting another down, you're not going to score some points. And then that leaves you open to a situation where when you do make a mistake, right, when Alexander Mattison, your backup running back, fumbles deep in your own territory, and now you're behind and you have to lead a 37-second drive, which, by the way, there has not been a faster game-winning drive in the NFL thus far, right? There have been 3 37-second game-winning drives. One of them is by the Vikings. Crazy to think of that as being true, but that's it. So, that is not a high probability situation for your offense to come away from, right? You should not rely on your offense to be able to win 37 seconds. That's disgusting that you would think of that as a possibility. And obviously that wasn't the plan, but you put yourself in a situation where that had to be the plan. And you don't need to if you have a conservative game plan where you're running the ball at a 21% success rate. That's the thing they get. Like, if you're running the ball well, I get it. There's a bunch of pretty good data that indicates, and people with a better data science background haven't looked into this as much. So it's really just me trying to be as rigorous as possible, which I don't have the tools to be very rigorous. But there is, I shouldn't say a bunch of good data, but there is some pretty good data that indicates that if you're running well in the first half, there's not really a guarantee that you're going to continue to run well in the second half. And yeah, the reverse is kind of true too, but because running is a negative expected point thing, unless you have reasons to believe that you're going to run the ball well, like if you're Cleveland, right? Then there's not a reason for you to keep running into a brick wall. And the Vikings were more successful running the ball in the second half than they were in the first half, right? 'Cause that's how they got the 48-yard run, which, shout out to Ezra Cleveland, great block on that one. But it's generally just not going to get you where you need to go. The Vikings had 6 runs of 4 yards, or 6 or 7 runs of 4 yards or more. Out of 25 designed runs for Alexander Mattison and 5 more runs, I think one of them was Kirk, right? So 29 designed runs. 7 of them go for 4 yards or more. That's crazy. So bad offensive play calling.
Yeah. Let's talk defense for a moment. Anthony Barr was back. Anthony Barr played every snap. Anthony Barr wanted to die by the end of the game.
I've never heard a more did you listen to the presser, or did you only, because in the presser he sounded he didn't sound like he wanted to die so much as he was resigned to that fact. Right?
He just recognized his mortality at that particular moment. How wild is it that somebody who's been injured for literally more than a full season comes back, isn't on a pitch count, ends up going the entire game, every snap on defense, like it's nothing, and then afterwards, I was going to explode. Yeah, I was I was expecting to pass out. How do you not?
Right. So okay, so he starts the presser with it was a lot of fun. Okay, it was everything I hoped to be. A lot of energy out there, a lot of emotions. It was kind of a crazy game. Happy to come out on the right side of it. Okay, normal presser so far. Were you ever tired? You played every single snap. Were you ever tired? I was definitely exhausted multiple times, but you just got to fight through that. That's the process of conditioning, just pushing through those times where you feel like you're going to pass out. You just kind of skipped over that part. You feel like you're going to pass out? Okay. Well, did you feel like, you needed to get back in football shape? Is there any rust? I felt a little slow at times. That's normal. That'll come back. Players change, schemes change, but football is essentially the same. Well, what's the hardest part about getting in football shape? Oh, it's everything, right? There's the cardiovascular, the strength. There were multiple plays when I felt like I was never going to be able to walk again. Your body feels like it explodes, and then you get up like, okay, I'm good. The more of those I get, the more conditioning my body gets just for banging and running and all that good stuff. And then Chad, my colleague at The Athletic, was like, football sounds awful. Like that was the question. Like, football sounds awful. And he's like, it's kind of sweet. It's kind of good to be in pain. and then he talks more about how crazy the win is, and we're like, yeah, you're pretty calm for like all the stuff that you just said. Not just how crazy the win was, but like that you feel like you're gonna die.
Do we get to revive the trope and rebrand it as Anthony Barr just says some things?
No, because Adrian Peterson got him in trouble, right? Anthony Barr is like clearly just speaking the truth and not caring, whereas Adrian Peterson was speaking whatever was in his head, right? Like that's way different, right?
Yeah, Anthony Barr went out there and just did the whole "if he dies, he dies" thing. Like,
well, because he literally said it. Because we were like, "Hey, well, okay, so when you get out there, a lot of people say it's a good thing to get your first hit in there, but it's a knee injury. Did you feel like maybe they're going to go after your knee? And how did you feel about that?" And he's like, "No, you just got to let it go. What's going to be is what it's going to be. It's that type of thing. Just let loose." Like I said, if I explode, I explode. What? That's twice in the that's well, you said the word explode 3 times in the press conference, and we are not talking about explosive plays. We are talking about your body disintegrating. Like that is the context of you using the word explode. Like that you might die. So yeah, that's what he got out of it. So yeah, so he argued. So he says that he was exhausted, that he was tired, that he, had difficulty kind of moving around sometimes. And that's kind of what he looked like in the game too, right? Like I think PFF's grade of him is a little harsh. It tends to be a little bit harsher than my opinion of him in general, but he didn't end up with a good score. We asked if they tested him in coverage. He said he didn't feel like he was tested any more than normal. And he didn't give up any big plays, but he did give up 7 receptions while he was the primary linebacker in coverage, according to PFF. I think 1 or 2 of those are situations where there was a weird pass off. Like at least on one of them, Bashad Breeland might have been attempting to carry a guy across the field, and Barr picks him up, and they don't know which one has him. And so that guy's just kind of let open, and that was the biggest receiving play that he gave up, which is 18 yards. But yeah, he got tested a couple of times. He didn't get burned or anything like that, but he didn't, make plays in coverage that, we remember him, from the first couple of years, with the Vikings. But Anthony Barr made himself known as a pass rusher. He himself was not effective necessarily. They did rush him off the edge. They rushed him up the middle. They rushed him up the B gap along with Kendricks. They did all the stuff that we're used to seeing the Vikings do with Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr from 2 and 3 years ago, where they kind of occupied the gaps. And that did result in a fair amount of pressure for Goff. Initially, when I looked at it, I thought his pressure rate was pretty high. It still remains, pretty high. He ended up with a pressure rate of like 36% on standard dropbacks. It's a little bit higher if you include dropbacks that were like penalized and stuff like that. So the plays that don't count, his pressure rate ends up like 39-40%. But it was a pretty high pressure rate. Obviously, the Vikings were able to take advantage of that by forcing a couple of sacks on those. I don't know if they've like fixed the official stat count, because I think it's like Griffin 2.0 and Hunter 1.0, but it should be 1.5 sacks for both of them. Plus that forced fumble on that 1 sack was really important. So they were able to get a decent amount of pressure, and Anthony Barr was a part of that pressure package, which was really nice to see. But overall, he played, I think, linebacker in a way that fits better, right? And by that, I mean, he read plays faster and got to the line of scrimmage faster running plays. He got to his spot drops faster than Nick Vigil typically does on passing plays. He just diagnosed faster. He was able to get to the blocks that he needed to get to. He didn't get blown up by blocks. He wasn't moved very much in the running game. He was able to squeeze some lanes. I thought, generally speaking, even though he didn't have a huge statistical contribution, his ability to kind of help contain the running game, especially the backside of runs, was much better than Nick Vigil's. And so that's why I think the PFF grade here is just a little bit off, because he did a little bit more in this game to enable what the Vikings do defensively in the run game. I think, just as I predicted before the game, losing Michael Pierce was a bigger loss than gaining Anthony Barr was in terms of defending against the run. Armon Watts had a better game against the run than I thought he would. It still wasn't very good. And so you end up like gaining a little, losing a lot in that situation. But yeah, it was nice to see Anthony Barr back. It'll be nicer still if he's like fully healthy and can kind of get into football movement shape. But yeah, you did have highlights. Danielle Hunter played extremely well. Eric Kendricks played freaking lights out. Like, if you took away Eric Kendricks' pick, obviously you take away his best play, but he also just played well against the run. I think he had 4 tackles near the line of scrimmage. I think PFF has him with 4 stops. And that was, again, it helped to have Anthony Barr out there, but that was just a bunch of really heady play. He was able to read the Detroit Lions defense. It seemed like our offense a little bit faster than it seemed like in the past couple of games. I don't think he missed a tackle in this game, which was a nice change of pace from the first couple of games of the season. And I don't know that he gave up much in coverage, but then he has that pick too, which is crazy, remarkable to see. Danielle Hunter constantly in the backfield. I think he had like 6 pressures or something like that by my count. I think PFF has him with 4. And he was able to kind of stand up in the run game in a way that he hadn't in some of these other games. So it was nice to see that. I don't know if Patrick Peterson was even targeted. PFF says he was 4 times, but only gave up 39 yards. Pretty good game from him. No, he had 2 pass deflections, so of course he was targeted. Yeah. But yeah, a good game from those players. And then Armon Watts, I thought, was up and down. You take a look at his PFF grade; it's largely good. I think it was better than I think we've seen in a long time since his rookie year. I'll say that. But it also, he's trying to backdoor a lot on pressure plays, and that's kind of working for him. But then he tries to do it on running plays, and he gives up a gap. And it just feels like he's doing a move that he knows works for him, and right now it seems to be the only move he has. And offensive linemen are taking advantage of it in the run game. So I want to see more from him, but it was a better game than usual. Everson Griffin looked, I think, phenomenal, especially as a pass rusher, of course. He ended up with the most pressures in the game. But I thought he looked lights out. Not much to say. Zimmer said that they wanted to reduce the snap count after this. So he had 49 snaps in the game. They wanted to be at 35. Mostly because, obviously it'd be nice to have 50 snaps at this level of play over the course of a full game, but you don't know if that'll last 17 games. So they want to reduce the snap count to preserve him later in the season. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, Mackenzie Alexander's a really great tackler. As a coverage guy, he was kind of whatever. Bashad Breeland wasn't like catastrophic on the field. Talk about the other thing in a second. I don't think we got much. Dalvin Tomlinson did not think had a good game, but I don't think there's much else to say about the defense. It just, when it was working, it was really great, but it is the Detroit Lions offense. When it wasn't working, it was kind of baffling. So I feel like that characterizes a lot of it. The biggest issue were the turnovers on offense that led to the scores, like the red zone score. Obviously, a couple of missed assignments on the DeAndre Swift touchdown, and that was like the big thing, right? But yeah, I mean, the Lions, they were left with Kaderil Hodge and Amon-Ra St. Brown because Quintez Cephas, their best receiver, was injured halfway through the game. And when that happens, you should just be rolling, right? Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is like a fine 4th round pick, but he's like a rookie who's not that fast. And so you should just be able to handle these two. And I felt like even though they dominated the Lions offensive line, when the receivers are that bad, you should not be allowing points, like almost period.
Well, should we talk about Bashad Breeland? Let's talk about him on the field first, and then his off the field after.
A better game from Bashad Breeland. Well, once again, his best snap was when he got beat and the ball was overthrown, and he was able to stunt on the fact that he did nothing on the play. But he only gave up 19 yards as a primary defender in coverage. He benefited from a Trinity Benson drop, which is when he was booed. and then he like goaded the fans in the stadium. I guess after
he
that,
encouraged the fans to boo him because those fans are only fueling him. I think is the only way that doesn't look horrible, but it still felt a lot. I think I even mentioned this on Twitter. It still felt a lot like when the Mets about a month or 2 months ago were doing terribly, and they were hate effing the fans.
Right.
Yeah, when they were hitting home runs, and like the fans don't. That home run wasn't for the fans. That home run was for us. Because these fans have been booing us all season. So screw the fans. They don't matter to us. This is for that home run was for us. Like
the difference is that the home run is a good play, right? That you made, right?
Yeah.
Here it's just like, yeah, I guess a drop is, but you didn't make the drop. The drop happened. You got lucky.
Yeah, this was
very weird.
Just really, I don't think I've ever seen a corner try to get the crowd to be louder to boo him. Like to boo himself. I don't think I've ever seen that in my years of watching football.
It's very weird, right? Because like there are corners that like don't care what the fans think, and there are like we've had like a lot of different types of cornerbacks who've responded to public pressure in a bunch of different ways.
Hell, we saw one retire at halftime one game in Buffalo.
That ruled. I can't, like, if Buffalo wasn't good right now and like possibly the best team in football, I think we'd still be talking about that. That's so funny.
It's still epic. It's still amazing. But this was just...
that's just wild to me. That's crazy.
But
yeah, so after the game, I got to pull up like the specific, which technically the specific wording of the tweet is family friendly, right? But... So he ends up tweeting out sexual innuendo. Okay. He ends up tweeting out, I'm convinced y'all love my Johnson in y'all mouth. Enjoy the win and shut TF up. Still want the iTunes rating, right? So, okay. He tweets that. He deletes it. Then he tweets out like petty, petty me, which is just a very weird thing to say. So he tweets that, deletes the tweet, tweets out a couple more things, takes up like a bunch of engagement, I guess, for tweeting out all that stuff. We asked Zimmer about, like, this is like another week where we've asked Zimmer about a cornerback tweet, and another week he's like, yeah, we got to talk to him about it. But Zimmer just like, he ends up just like going off, and he's like, you know what? If I was asked that question that a reporter asked, and like Chris Thomason asked it, he's in the room. He's like right next to Zimmer, right? A reporter asks if I'm embarrassed to be ranked 103rd out of 103 cornerbacks in the league. You know, I'd be frustrated. I'd respond that way too. And another reporter points out, I mean, it sounds like he's saying that to the fans. And like, to be clear, yes, it very much sounds like Breland is talking about the fans and not like he might be fueled, right? Like he might be on, if it wasn't for Thomason's question, he might not have done that, right? It might be fueled in part by that, but it's very clearly a response to the fans. Like, enjoy the win. Yeah, man, he's talking to the reporter. You're right. Like, I'm convinced y'all love my Johnson in y'all mouth. Like, that's clearly he's talking to the fans, right? He was egging the fans on, right, when they were booing him. It's very clear that he's talking about the fans, and the reporter's like, so he's talking about the fans, right? And he's like, no, Zimmer was like, no, he's talking about the reporter. And then he like looks at Thomason.
Regardless of your opinion on Thomason, he wasn't talking about Thomason.
He wasn't talking about Thomason. And I think I don't think it's necessarily crazy unprofessional. Like, I think it's unprofessional. I don't think it's necessarily awful for coaches and players to bite back at reporters, right? Like, I don't necessarily think that that's an awful thing, right? Like, it might be unprofessional, but I don't really tend to value professionalism as much as other people. I don't know if you've noticed. So it's generally unprofessional, right? And how Zimmer has interacted with Thomason, generally unprofessional. I think we can all agree on that. Whether or not we agree it's a good or a bad thing, different, right? But this, I think, is both unprofessional and probably a bad thing, because you probably should not be covering for your corner who is tweeting profane innuendo at fans that are booing him, right? Like that's like a weird thing to say is okay.
It is a weird thing to stand up for, to be sure. And this is a corner who is ranked incredibly low on all of this. And
Thomason then tweeted out, and let's be clear, tweeting this out is also kind of petty. So I'm not going to like, if Bashaud Breeland's being petty, and different degrees, right? Thomason tweeted out that Breeland improved his PFF grade to 104 out of 109, which is true. I guess. I don't. So as not to cast aspersions on players unnecessarily or members of the beat unnecessarily, I will just leave it at that. Sounds true to me.
That's a thing, and an annoying thing that we have to talk about.
This team, dude. Like, how many times do I got to talk about cornerback tweets?
Yeah, this is. Ugh. All right, last thing I want to talk about is the sequence at the very end of the game in which you gave the Lions enough shots. The Lions finally, scored some points, ended up going for 2, and it worked out. And ignoring the comeback, this seemed like one of the more like Vikings things that could have happened. Like you just sat there and went, "Oh, of course this is going to happen. We're going to lose to Detroit."
Yeah, when the Lions converted, right, when they ended up with the 2 points to take the lead, which I find it interesting, right, because the stat boys, the little calculator guys, say that actually they should have kicked it. My model says they should have kicked it instead of going for 2. And I hate that, and I don't believe it, and I will not listen to it. I love that they went for 2. And I think there's a clear statistical case that on balance, you should go for 2, which is that it is generally a little bit easier to score from 2 than it is to both kick the extra point and win in overtime, because overtime is basically determined by the coin flip, right? Because if you've got the ball first, you've got a heavy advantage. So the coin flip matters a lot, right? So let's say it's 50-50 because it is 50-50 because the coin flip controls all the outcomes. So it's 50-50 in overtime. You got a 50% chance times the chance that you'll make the extra point, which is not 100%. It is evidently not even 94%, I guess, this year. But let's say it's 98%, right? So you've got an under 50% chance. You got a 48% chance of winning if you line up for the extra point. You also know that you've got Jared Goff and the Lions offense. Your best receiver is out. Your offensive line is getting beat up. And you win by scoring points. You don't win by stopping points, right? Like, obviously, if you force a turnover and you kick a field goal, you win. So obviously the defense plays a big role. But the offense, I think, is even more dominant in an overtime situation than it is in a full game situation, right? So I would think that their chances of winning in overtime are lower than 50% because in order for them to score, they needed a turnover in the red zone. How likely is that to happen multiple times? It's the Vikings, so more than not, but unlikely generally speaking. Versus the Vikings offense, which has a lot more talent and in standard game situations actually does all right. Like obviously in the second half of games, they're not doing great, but in this game, characterized by like weird drops and stuff like that, turnovers, you can't really count on that if you're the Lions. So I would think that your chances, if you're the Lions, of winning in overtime are actually lower than 50%. Plus, though the Vikings were really great in the red zone, scoring from 2 on one play, while lower than 50%, probably if you're the Lions, it's still probably not enough to overcome what I think is the talent differential between the two. So I actually do like the go for 2. And also, like, attitudinally, I love it. Like, let's just win here. Let's just go home, right? It also protects the players by preventing an overtime. Like, there's a lot of reasons to love it. They go for 2, and I tweeted out after they did that is that the Vikings absolutely deserve this. And I had no one disagree with me. Every single person who interacted with that tweet in some way, quote tweet, reply, whatever, all agreed that the Vikings deserve to lose this game because of how bad the play calling was offensively, how much they collapsed defensively. There was nothing where it felt like the Vikings were getting bitten by karma, despite it being a close game, despite there being a couple of weird calls. Like I think there were some bad calls against like Chris Herndon, for example, who it seems like all he does is get on the field and take penalties. But like, I felt like the unfair penalty, whatever it is, was trending away from the Vikings, right? Plus, they missed a kick, which, it wasn't like a guaranteed, was the missed kick like a 40-yard or 2, right? So there's a lot of reasons to feel like the win got snatched away from them, right? But obviously, it just felt like the Vikings deserved it. And no one disagreed with me. Obviously, that tweet stayed up after the Vikings won. And so a bunch of people got, like Vikings fans especially, got mad at me because now it looks like I tweeted out that the Vikings deserved the win, which very few people believe. And so I had to like explain, like, no, I tweeted this out after like the 2-point conversion. But yeah, it very much not just felt like a Vikings game, but like that they did not do, like, the Lions morally deserved, whatever that means, right? Like, it's a football game, it doesn't matter. But like, morally, the Lions deserve that victory more than the Vikings did.
Just a bunch of ridiculousness. All right, are we done talking about this stupid game? Because it's absurd that.
I want to add one last thing. We saw Christian Darrisaw, Rashad Hill. That's going to be a talker. Luckily, I wrote a piece, so I'm going to shift it all over to The Athletic. I wrote a piece about Christian Darrisaw versus Rashad Hill, who played better at left tackle. They switched off every 2 drives. So Rashad Hill had the first 2 drives, Christian Darrisaw had the next 2, Rashad the next 2, et cetera, et cetera. Rashad Hill gave up 2 pressures. One of them was a sack. Christian Darrisaw gave up no pressures, but they had very similar PFF grades. And PFF updated the grades since most of the tweets about the PFF grades came out. So now Darrisaw has a slightly higher grade instead of a slightly lower grade than Rashad Hill. And that makes sense to me. That follows from what I watched. I rewatched it all. Again, that's going to be all in the piece. I will say this. Rashad Hill only gave up more pressures because they happened to be on plays where Cousins couldn't get rid of the ball quickly enough. Not necessarily Cousins' fault. It might be, might not be, could be the coverage, whatever, right? But the mistakes Christian Darrisaw made were faster and were on plays that somebody just got open right away. And so it didn't get marked as a pressure against Darrisaw. Darrisaw is also, in my opinion, a better run blocker, but gave up more dramatic losses as a run blocker, just less frequently, and clearly still needs more time to get used to the speed of the NFL. There's going to be a lot more in that piece at The Athletic, but my initial impressions are that Darrisaw played a lot better. I watch it closer, and I feel like they actually are pretty close. I think the PFF grades are maybe a little bit too close, maybe on target, but they actually did play very similarly. It's just the weirdness of the sample causes Rashad Hill to statistically look a lot worse, when actually I think he only played a little bit worse, and I think it would make sense to continue alternating or even to play Rashad Hill, because this is one of those situations where now that you're on film, they might see something about you that they can take advantage of. And if you're making mistakes quickly, they will make you make that same mistake quickly more often now that they have film on it. So I actually understand why you would do this and rotate a little bit to get Rashad Hill, to get Christian Darrisaw up to speed while reducing the risk of catastrophic failure for having a rookie tackle who's not in there. But I will say, Darrisaw did play a little bit better than I anticipated based off of the fact that he's only had 12 practices thus far, his entire NFL career. But he just needs more time.
Well, in spite of ourselves, the Vikings won. And if you would have told me at beginning of the year or even a couple of months ago that the Vikings at the end of week 5 would have the same record as the Chiefs in week 5, I would have said, oh no, what happened to Mahomes' ACL? Like, what happened to him? Is he hurt? Is he okay? Like, what would have happened? I don't know if
that's
I would
one of
have
those things where a stranger walks up to you and says it, and you don't think, oh, fantastic. That you immediately think, yeah, there's a catch here. This is a podcast hypothetical. I know what's happening. Yeah. I'm in a podcast world.
Yeah, this is clearly a simulation. I refuse to believe that the Vikings could have something that positive happen to them by week 5. No. This is...
I know there's a catch here, and I don't want Mahomes hurt, so I turned this down.
Exactly. This is not good. All right, let's go over to the mailbag.
Also, the Vikings have the best point differential in the division. Just still, I don't know how it keeps happening. They've remained. That's what the nature of the thing is. They have the best point differential in the division. Take that, Packers, I guess.
Yeah. Raul asks the first mailbag question. He says, we're all calling for a more aggressive, pass-heavy offense, but wasn't that what the John DeFilippo era was? How do we avoid the mistakes of that era?
So it is not, the issue is not that John DeFilippo passed the ball a lot, although that was Mike Zimmer's issue, is that he designed bad plays. Here's one thing to keep in mind about the John DeFilippo era. They had Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph and Dalvin Cook and Laquan Treadwell, right? That was like your third receivers, Laquan Treadwell. The guy with the highest depth of route, so not depth of target, but the guy who ran the deepest routes in that offense was Laquan Treadwell. Who is the slowest guy out of everybody I just named? Like, that's the problem with the John DeFilippo offense, is that Stephon Diggs was rarely running routes more than 7 yards downfield. He's the best receiver in that offense. And I remember like fighting people. I brought this up a couple of times. I need to stop bragging about it. But I remember fighting people about it because, there's a question about whether or not Adam Thielen is better or Stephon Diggs is better. And Adam Thielen kept on outproducing Stephon Diggs, and fine, whatever, right? But when you think of Stephon Diggs as a guy who's just Jarvis Landry, that offense is not going to be good. Like, the reason that you're not running the ball is because you're turning your passes into runs. We have a lot of heavy pass offenses in the NFL. Justin Herbert runs a pass-heavy offense. That offense seems fine to me. The Buffalo Bills last year were one of the pass-heaviest offenses in the league. That seems fine to me. The issue is not a pass-heavy offense. The issue was John DeFilippo, is that he couldn't design good passing plays. He put receivers in bad situations, and they still... Like, that was the year Kyle Rudolph ended up with like 800 yards or something like that, right? Because they threw the ball a lot. But they especially threw the ball to Kyle Rudolph a lot. And Rudolph is like a fine red zone receiver. He's a good red zone tight end. But like, that guy should not be getting 800 yards in your offense. It was just a bad offense. And I ran like a thing where back when we had access, I think, to the old PFF grades, I was able to do a little bit of math to see if I could use PFF offensive grades to predict points. And you run like a simple multivariate regression that Excel will just do for you. I don't have to actually know math. Excel will do it. So it's probably not statistically super sound, but it'll predict points reasonably well. And then you can match that up with the offensive coordinator and say, hey, you've got these high-performing players in situations where they're not scoring points. I'll use this to determine two things. One, how lucky an offense is, because when turnovers occur matter. And then two, how good an offensive coordinator is at putting high talent players in high value positions to be able to score points. And all of the guys at the bottom, I think like the bottom 20 guys, because it was a sample of like 10 seasons, the bottom 20 guys were generally considered, I think to a person, all considered to be bad offensive coordinators that year. Now, two of them turned it around, and I don't remember who it was, but the other one was Kyle Shanahan, right? Ended up turning it around, turning in the 2015 Falcons and then the 2016 Falcons, which was the record-breaking offense. But that year, that offense was really poor, even though they had a lot of high-talent players. So you could turn it around, but it was pretty rare. And everybody else was awful, and John DeFilippo was like the third worst on the list. It was a bad offense because there's a bad offensive coordinator designing it, not because they threw the ball a lot. It's because Laquan Treadwell ran the deepest routes of that offense.
Probably not terribly wise. Zen Cupid asks, is there anyone on this planet more gifted at making a burst of emotion more awkward than Kirk Cousins? In my Kirk headcanon, his programming is like, yes, now is the time humans would be excited. Initiate excitement protocol. You like that.exe. We didn't cover it because it's a non-story and you can actually read his lips to say you like that and all. It does look awkward, and I was Dusty had texted me yesterday and asked what I thought about the shoving thing or whatever, and my response was, obviously the funny version is that he's kind of lost his mind or whatever, but more likely what happened is he just doesn't know what to do with his hands.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where it's like, hey, here's some guys being dudes. One of these guys is not used to being a dude. That's all. That was my whole read on it, right? I saw that. I didn't think about it. Then I saw a couple of tweets blow up. I saw a couple of beat writers talked about it. Some people were convinced that it was meaningful. I wasn't. Chad, my colleague at The Athletic, was like, well, here's this other angle that comes from Sunday Night Football. And it shows Zimmer smiling. And it kind of did. I don't know. But I did not care about it. And then I got 18 DMs and a bunch of people tweeting at me. And it was just like, look, man, I know that if there were a team where a quarterback and the head coach got into a fight, this would be that team. I get it. We're all preconditioned to believe that after a win, the quarterback and the head coach went at it. And somehow, despite being 70 and 5'10", the coach wins. I get it, right? But I don't see that, right? the only thing that makes it weird is that the security guy is holding Zimmer back or pulling him back. Like, that's the only thing. I shouldn't say the only thing. Kirk also makes it weird.
That is pretty classic, though.
But, like, if the security guy never did that, I think it would just look like the first thing I thought of, because my brain is rotted by media, is the scene from Remember the Titans, right? Strong side, weak side. Strong side, left side. It doesn't matter. It's been a while since I watched the movie. But like, they're celebrating and they're shoving each other and they're yelling at each other and they're mean mugging, and that's just what people do. Come on, man. I've rarely been on football teams, but I have been on football teams, and I've done that exact thing. And how many times do you think I've had an opportunity to do that and I've still done that? That's crazy.
It's...
I did fight my debate partner after a win, though. That did happen, and that was malicious.
Well, that's...
different, though.
It's policy debate, and that's just a different animal altogether.
Oh, yeah, the emotions run way higher. Yeah, for sure.
Ethan asks, is this Vikings team just the mid-2010 Steelers? Extremely talented, dubiously coached, and always playing one-score games no matter what the talent level of the competition.
I would say that Big Ben, I hate complimenting Ben Roethlisberger. Screw that dude. But he's way more talented than Cousins. And Cousins is like probably underrated by a good chunk of the fan base. And he's coming off of like a 3-game stretch at the beginning of the season where he was great. But like, it's Ben Roethlisberger, right? Like, he was way better than that. So Zimmer likes the run the ball, then throw deep shots offense, which is not what this one is. They tried to be against the Lions, and that's what I predicted would happen in the Lions. And I think that we were on track for that until the Lions, I guess, ran a bunch of cover 2 or whatever. But the Steelers embodied that. Run the ball and throw deep. That's all they did. So there's like parallels here for sure, right? Create a lot of pressure on defense, find ways to be in one-score games. But I feel like the reason that they could do that and kind of get forward with that is because when they needed to open up the offense, they could do it. And so the one-score games are either a product of, and I think they were kind of overrated how often they happened because they just happened to be on national television when they were up against the Ravens, who were also a good team at the time. But I think that it was just because teams would either backdoor their way into a cover, which must have annoyed bettors a lot, or because like, it's 6-6 and then they decide to open up the offense and Ben Roethlisberger is good, right? Like, I think that's the difference. Here, the Vikings offense is legitimately trying. It's like, it really wants to score a second half touchdown. It aches to score a second half touchdown, and it cannot. It does not know how.
No, it certainly doesn't. And I don't necessarily agree with this statement, but there are people who actually raise the question as to whether or not Roethlisberger is a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he isn't. I am saying that question is not asked of Kirk Cousins.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I imagine that Roethlisberger is going to be in the Hall of Fame. And if I didn't care about him, I'd vote for him. I think his resume is there and stuff like that. But yeah, I'd be happy if he wasn't. Either way, it doesn't matter. That conversation is there. And I cannot imagine. I guess there's a conceivable world where Cousins is in that conversation. Like, he just pulls off 2 Super Bowl wins, right? And you're just like, well, you gotta, right? You had 2 Super Bowl wins. You have to put that guy in the Hall of Fame.
And like, he wins the MVP of both. 450 yards each time,
right, yeah.
Back to back.
You can craft the path, right? He's not locked out of the Hall of Fame.
No.
But man, you do not see that. That is not in your 95% of possible outcomes.
No, you're watching Doctor Strange like wave that one off. That's not happening.
Yeah. There's one universe. Yeah.
Yeah. Kyle Slaby asks, has Greg Joseph earned the big money extension we all know Rick is dying to give him?
I gotta know if Rick thinks that as soon as the money comes, the misses will come. Like, I gotta know if Rick is superstitious like that, because I feel like he is. Like, as much as we call him an analytics guy, I think there's enough of Rick that is superstitious that's the case. I think he's going to wait until the off season, just as to not curse himself.
He also asks, is Thielen a modern day retelling of the Jordy Nelson mythos?
Wasn't Jordy Nelson like drafted in the 2nd round or something like that? Like, he went to a Power 5 school, went to like Kansas State or something, right? Like,
he was drafted, yeah.
Yeah, I think the way we treat Thielen will probably end up being the way a lot of Packers media treat Jordy Nelson. but at least it'll ring truer with Thielen, right? Like, he did literally earn a job selling dental equipment and was just like, hold on, before I take this job, I got to go do this tryout. We'll see if I make the NFL roster. And the interviewer was like, good luck, I guess. like Jordy Nelson got drafted. Like, he was like 6'2" and ran a 4.6. Like, he was at NFL speed. I guess Thielen's NFL speed, but he didn't go to the combine like Jordy Nelson did.
No,
right?
He was round 2, pick 36 from Kansas State.
A high second round pick. Like, not even like a high second round pick. That's like the Jordy Nelson mythos is a mythos because it's fake, right? Because like he's a farm kid that went to a farm state to play for their small town team or whatever.
Didn't
right?
even
so
go to like a farm. He didn't even move the farm state. He stayed in Kansas. That's where he's from.
Right. Yeah. And then he goes to a small team, right? Like he goes to the Green Bay, right? A small school or a small city team, small market team. And so it feels farmy, right? But that's just a crafted myth, which is not to say he's not literally from a farm. He is, I believe. But like, it's more like he was established by the time he entered the NFL, right? A high second round pick. Thielen did not have an undrafted free agent contract. Like, that's a little different. Like, if you're a second round pick, you're not doing interviews about sales jobs, right? Like, you're not earning commission, is what I'm saying. So, if it is a modern day retelling of the Jordy Nelson mythos, it is at least one truer to form.
It's definitely more. I say retelling, but that's recasting, maybe. No.
Yeah, it's like one of those remakes.
Yeah.
That feels truer to the original material, even though the original material doesn't exist. It's like a platonic ideal of like the scrappy white receiver or whatever.
Yeah.
Like Welker's a good example of that too, but he's too big city for these folks.
Much. Arif's Neglected Resistance Bands asks, are we sure this wasn't a loss? Brian Jellerson asks, do you agree with Darrisaw's 55 PFF score?
Kind of. So I watch all of Darrisaw's snaps in a row. Like, I didn't watch Darrisaw, then Hill, then Darrisaw, then Hill. So I watched all the Darrisaw snaps, then I watched Hill snaps. And the number of mistakes Darrisaw made seemed to be about average for a tackle. And then I was like, yeah, that was pretty low grade. And then I realized, wait, but he played half as many snaps as an average tackle. So I should, in my head, actually double the number of mistakes he made in order to fully evaluate him. And from that perspective, it was actually a fairly poor performance, even though there's a lot of encouraging things. Again, referring to my article in The Athletic, I'll talk about those. But I get it. Like, maybe I agree it's a 60, which actually I think they moved it up finally to 60, but the initial tweets said it was 55. But yeah, I get the 55-60. That makes sense to me based off of the fact that I had to adjust for the fact that he only played 27 snaps and he made as many mistakes as he did.
Just yeah. Let's go to Tim, who asks, how can a win make me feel so sad? Is being dead inside the only way to survive life as a Vikings fan? Sub-question, will Darrisaw start at left tackle versus Carolina?
Answer your sub-question first. Probably not. Obviously, we don't know, but I imagine that Rashad Hill will start. Next, is being dead inside the only way to survive life as a Vikings fan? Yes, because that is surviving, that is not living, and that is exactly what being a Vikings fan is. It is to absolve yourself of the responsibilities of living and give yourself to the vagaries of surviving. How can a win make me feel so sad? We spent an hour on that.
Yeah.
But the Vikings do not inspire confidence to be the team we want them to be. That's why.
Fair enough. Dr. Aaron Matson asks, watching some of the passes Cousins was making in the first half to Jefferson, it looked like we were getting some of the good Kirk. What happened? Was it play calling? Did Kirk get conservative? Did Detroit somehow do something to take that away? And Kubiak didn't find a way to counter?
I think Kubiak, I think, did not really find a way to counter. I think so. The Vikings see too high. They run the ball a little bit more. And I should have mentioned that in the recap. Because you see too high, you're more likely to stick to the run play you're in or audible into a run because there's fewer play. I feel like they should have kept sticking with play action. That would have been a little bit better because I think it would have moved those safeties a little bit more. But yeah, they ran too high a little bit more often. And I think Kirk's natural response to that was to throw shorter, even though there were open options in too high.
Kenneth Allen asks, what happened to Kubiak's play calling from the first quarter of the season? It doesn't even seem like they got forced off their game plan. They just came out with an awful plan. Is it just not taking the game against an awful opponent as seriously as they should?
I remember Luke tweeting out that he thought Jefferson wasn't taking the game seriously, but Luke, you're wrong. Jefferson got 105 yards in the first half. Second, we take a lot of shots at Luke now. I feel like that did not happen the last season.
Well, what happened was that he joined us on our show. And
we introduced him into the Norse Code metaverse. That's true.
And then I went on his show, and I like to think that he is being ruined and what's the word I'm looking for? That he's no longer as squeaky clean now as a result of being associated with the Norse Code Fantasy League.
Right. The blight of the Norse Code podcast has dimmed the squeaky clean light of Locked On Vikings.
Yeah, sure. It for sure has damaged his reputation, at least by association. To be associated with the Norse Code and the Norse Code Fantasy League, like the Norse Code experience, really.
Yeah, Norse Code, we're about ruin. All right, so what happened to the Kubiak play calling from the first quarter of the season? I think the play calling is getting like team specific, right? Like against the Browns, you knew that pass rush was coming, so you wanted to get rid of the ball quickly. Against the Lions, I think they wanted those deep shots, and again, this is something that on the Lions podcast on the one that I was on with Jeremy Reisman. I predicted that the Vikings would go back to their old game plan, do a lot more play action, throw deep a lot more often. That seemed to be what happened in the first half. And I think that's because they expected the Lions to continue playing single high, but play it poorly and give up a lot of deep shots. They were willing to stay in the pocket a lot more, especially because they haven't had a healthy pair of edge rushers, right? Because Romeo Okwara was healthy when Trey Flowers wasn't, and Trey Flowers was healthy for this game when Romeo Okwara wasn't. So they couldn't generate much of a pass rush, and the guys that they put in the interior, kind of like the Vikings, are just kind of all nose tackles, so they don't really get interior pressure. So they didn't feel that it was as important to get rid of the ball quickly. So I think that that's it, and I'm confident that that's the reason, because that was kind of a prediction going in that was confirmed. And so that kind of helps with the hypothesis that they changed their game plan because it was pretty opponent specific. I don't think it's about taking an opponent not as seriously as they should. I think they've like forever learned their lesson from the Buffalo Bills game. I think it is instead they had a game plan. The Lions shifted what that game plan would look like in the second half a little bit, and they couldn't run the ball, which is part of the game plan, I guess.
Christopher asks, we finally heard Chris Herndon's name come up, but not in a good way, for costly penalties. Arif, does the All-22 film give you any insight as to his contributions to the team? His stat line certainly doesn't. Was it a bad trade?
Ben Ellefson is currently out-snapping him. Like, he showed up on the same day as Chris Herndon. Like, it's not like Ben Ellefson doesn't know the playbook any better, right? Arguably, he knows it worse, right? Because Chris Herndon has been in at least one similar-ish offense. But no, he's not. Whatever it is that puts you on the field in the first place, whether it's knowledge of the playbook, whether it's athleticism in practices, execution within practices, and that kind of stuff. Whatever it is that puts you on the field, he's like not doing, right? So like Tyler Conklin obviously has the most tight end steps at 269. Ellefson has the next most at 74. And then and Ellefson wasn't even active for one game, right? Like he was missing for one of the games. And then Herndon has the next most at 50, right? So Ellefson is half again as many snaps. And Herndon snaps are primarily, route running, whereas Ellefson snaps are primarily run blocking, which means that because the Vikings technically throw the ball more than they run the ball, even though it doesn't feel that way, it should be even more. Like, I think they run the ball like 75% more. Anyway, it should feel even more like that Herndon should be on the field more than Ellefson, because him being a receiving tight end with the way the Vikings are treating him should give him even more opportunities to be on the field, and he's not doing that. So the issue is that Herndon isn't impressing the Vikings enough in whatever responsibilities would end up putting him on the field. Either he doesn't know the playbook, or he's misexecuting techniques or misexecuting concepts, or he's performing poorly in practices, or his attitude is turning them on, whatever it is, right? Like any number of things. It's not doing it. So that's why. But he has taken snaps. For context, the Vikings have had 353 offensive snaps, and Herndon has had 50 of them. Like, it's not very many. It's like that 1/7. That has to be 1/7. So yeah, and then Herndon is probably not getting open, which is why he isn't getting any targets. Evidently, he's committing penalties. They're not the most convincing penalties on the planet, but like, you probably just can't put yourself in that situation if you're him. Not much more to add to that. He's clearly not doing it.
Next question is from Bob Marks, who asks, so should the Vikings get a second kicker for field goals that are 40 to 49 yards and let Joseph kick all the rest, including the 50-plus field goals?
This reminds me of the early days of North Code. We talked about the value of having a kickoff specialist back before they moved the touchback line.
Yep.
And how a kickoff specialist was worth like 15 sacks in a season. Like, it was nuts. Because the Ravens did that with like Billy Cundiff. It was hilarious. Anyway, this is technically as a 50-plus specialist, right? Greg Joseph has only missed one kick over 40 yards. The other kick he missed was over 30 yards. So really what we're asking is for Greg Joseph to be the 50-plus specialist and another kicker to be your kicker. That's what you're asking. That rules, but the Vikings clearly have enough problems managing the size of the roster as it is. If we had a 55-person roster, yeah, I would love that, just because it'd be funny. But no, I'm sorry.
Like, we didn't even cover the missed kick, and but we will cover the missed kicks a little bit later. But that whole the fact that it was short too was just sad.
It was short. I can't, like, the guy who's nailing 55 yarders is kicking short on 42. Like, what the heck? What is this?
Yeah, this is this really is just throwing a dart at a board and seeing where it's gonna go. Like,
we're just spinning wheels, man. Who knows what's next?
This is pretty ridiculous. Christopher Wiley asks, wasn't Dan Campbell the guy who just this spring told the world, I know the analytics say to go for 2 there, and then declared he was a big fan of kicking the extra point rather than the 2-point conversion to win the game, like he did in this week's scenario? What happened?
He rules now. No.
The second part of this is, considering the insane level of play calling, do you get the feeling that if the Lions kick the extra point to tie the game, the Vikings just run out the clock and play for overtime instead of going for the win?
I don't remember him saying that, but he strikes me as a guy that like goes with what he feels in the moment. And I can't not love him. Like, the amount of emotion he shows, how much he cares for his players, how like high energy he is. Like, I'm sure I'll get sick of it, right? Like, a lot of people love Pete Carroll for a long time. Now they're sick of him. I get it. Fine. I'll be sick of Dan Campbell soon. But for now, I love him. I don't know what happened. He was just feeling his oats.
Well, let's go to the next question then, because I'm a little bit disturbed by how hard this is going to probably be. All right, let's see if I can do this. Nolan Kaler asks, for a Reefs Case Cookus corner, can Case Cookus' career continue to cornerback? How clear-cut is the Case Cookus case for the cornerback core, and how cowed will opposing pass catchers be to catch Case Cookus cleaning up at corner out of the corners of their corneas?
Incredible. Wow, you nailed it. Okay. A bit of behind the scenes. He did practice this, but he nailed his one practice take too. So he's actually 2 for 2. Love it. I will not be attempting it. Good job, James. My answer to this is Case Cookus.
As it should be. Damian Barrett asks, did the Lions shoot themselves in the foot by scoring the 2-point conversion, thus forcing the Vikings to go for it rather than settle for overtime when we no doubt would have found another way to blow it?
That's good. No, because I think that the general Vikingsness of it was to give up the game-winning 2-point conversion. I think the Vikings overcame themselves to win. And so I think the Lions did give the Vikings enough rope to hang themselves, and they miraculously found a way out of it. So I don't think the Lions shot themselves in the foot by scoring and preventing an overtime debacle. I think that was the debacle, and the Vikings, shuffled out of it somehow.
Also from Damian Barrett, in order to fund a hypothetical upcoming trip to Washington, D.C., I placed a not insubstantial parlay bet on both the Vikings and Patriots to win yesterday. apart from demonstrating just how bad I am at gambling, how much do you think I was sweating watching both games?
That's okay. That Patriots game was more of a disastrophe than even this Vikings-Lions game, right? Because you come out of the Vikings-Lions game knowing what happened and hating yourself, right? That's different. You come out of this Patriots-Texans game having no idea what the hell, like, Davis Mills looks like the best quarterback in the NFL. You've got like a bunch of weird missed kicks in this. Like this had like 3 or 4 missed kicks, I think. I mean, something you're intimately familiar with. And the Patriots, like, they go into the end zone in the second quarter and they never get into the end zone again, and they win with 25 points. No, they did get to the end zone in the fourth quarter, but like, like, I don't even know half the players in this game because they play for the Texans, right? Like, who is A. Auclair? I have no idea.
I just know that a 0-yard punt happened.
Yeah. That was nuts. That game is crazy. First of all, Mac Jones is not looking like all the way the announcers talk about him. But, so the Texans go up, then it's tied, then the Texans go up, and then they maintain their lead all the way to the fourth quarter, where the Patriots finally tie the game, with 9:30 left, and then somehow in the final seconds, score the game-winning kick in a game with like multiple missed kicks, right? So like, that must have been nuts, dude.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
That's a rough one.
Next time, instead of funding your trip to DC, you can just donate to Norse Code at paypal.me/Norse Code.
Well, that is also an option, a good option, really. Also, for James's parenting corner, yes, you read that right.
What does James know about what?
Will anything your kids ever achieve, whether it be president, first North Dakotan in space, which is not accurate. The first North Dakotan in space was a man by the name of James Buckley, who was also like a bit of a...
You fathered someone named James Buckley?
Yeah, well, no, he was the first North Dakotan. He was the first North Dakotan in space. And
right, that's what I'm saying.
He's actually a fairly fascinating human being, but also top spot on America's Most Wanted list, etc.
Sounds about right.
Will anything surpass the sense of pride you felt watching the fantasy chaos during the Sunday games, really the entire weekend?
How many missed extra points were there last
13.
the perfect number, too. Oh, my God.
There were 13 missed extra points. There were just a huge swath of just every variety of missed field goal. And
Kickers accrued negative 650 points in the Hell League. That's what you're saying.
It was...
Well, just from the extra points. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Just from the extra points. You know, it's odd that this has just kind of become my brand. This has become my thing that I love so much. And I was telling you earlier on the in the pre-show, I wasn't even in the room when the Colts missed their extra point. I came back into the room, saw that something had happened, went back on Hulu a couple seconds, and then just like ascended. Because like I couldn't. There's no other word for it. I just sat back. I laughed as hard as I have all weekend with every missed kick, and I think I even tweeted out, I was like, I am way too hungover to be dealing with the number of missed kicks from the first slate of games. Like, you guys were on a tear, and I feel an obligation to be involved in the conversation when these things happen, and I couldn't keep up with the number of missed kicks. It was Christmas morning. This was better than Christmas morning. This was like if I got all of my gifts and my younger brother's gifts at once, and I got to play with them in front of him. Like, nope, this is my Nintendo 64, not yours. This is just, it was everything I could have ever wanted it to be. I am sad because I'm convinced that this is like the high watermark as far as missed kicks are concerned. the both versions of the fantasy league, the Hell League and the regular league, where just the scores are works of art. I literally had I had 2 games tonight that I could have won or lost based on the performance of the Colts kicker. I had him in one league, and I was playing against him in the normal league. So I had him in the Hell League. If he misses an extra point in the Hell League, that's minus 50. If he misses an extra point in the regular league, it's negative 25. So I didn't have him in that league, but I was losing that game, and the other guy was winning.
Incredible.
As a result of his play, I lost the Hell League and I won the regular league based on that missed extra point. This league, these rules,
wild.
This whole thing, and I couldn't even be mad. That's amazing. That is truly spectacular. I can never. I don't know if there's anything my kids can do that'll make me as happy as I was this weekend. And I probably should never play that sentence back to them.
No, you gotta keep that. You gotta clip that, put that in the Patreon, the clip show, and then also, like the Einstein at sleep, right? Or like you teach your kids language at sleep. Just like dub over that recording and just with that phrase, so that your kids internalize while they sleep that you will never be proud of them, or I should say never be as proud of them as you are about a fantasy football league rule that you designed.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. All right, so let's go to the next question, which is going to be from Tommy Gunn, who asks, please rank the top 3 states you would not do a live show in based solely on the local culinary cuisine.
So I tried Googling like the worst like states for food or whatever. And the first list I got, I don't trust because like Florida is number 4 on the list. And it's like, you just don't know where to eat in Florida then. Like that's crazy. Like, so it is kind of difficult because I feel like there's always going to be, if I go to a state, there's always going to be something that I want to have. But there are a couple of things on this list that I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I'm not out of my mind to go and try Utah food, right? Like maybe this, again, I don't trust this article, and so they're like the thing in Utah is fry sauce and that's just ketchup and mayo mixed together. So
we wouldn't do a live show in Utah because there's no team in Utah as well. So
well, right, but like any place that there's a team, there's probably, I guess like there's nothing interesting to me about like Wisconsin food that I can't also get in Minnesota. So I guess no reason to do a live show for Green Bay, but I was just thinking of any state, right? Like we're doing a live show in a municipality that doesn't have a team, right? So it's possible.
I mean, it does technically have. Well, I mean, the fact that
it's not the team they're playing.
Well, no, it's not. It's just happens to be funny that we're doing a live show closer to the stadium than the stadium we're going to on the Sunday. So
right, yeah. But yeah, I can't think of a place that both has a team and also I wouldn't like. The list has Alaska and like maybe, but I do like seafood, I guess. So I don't know. This list has South Dakota and like, I'm just going to assume North Dakota food is better because I'm from there. So like, I can't think of a place that has bad food that I wouldn't want to go to that also has teams. Do you have answers to this?
The closest thing I've got is Ohio, but that's mainly because Don's from there.
Oh, that's fair. And I did have the Cincinnati chili, and that was bad. But I feel like, although apparently Cincinnatians, I don't know. People from Cincinnati told me because the stadium has an agreement with Gold Star Chili, I had the inferior version of Skyline or of Cincinnati chili. So I should have gone to Skyline. Fat chance I do that in the near future. It was not okay. So that wasn't good. But there's like Columbus has a lot of German immigrants with a lot of like good food that comes from that. So like, I don't know. There's like some Ohio specific food that I'm sure is good, but that might be the top of the list just because the Ohio food culture is not necessarily famous. Maybe I should know more about it, but I don't know. I guess I don't like super love the non-barbecue St. Louis scene, but I love the barbecue St. Louis scene. So like, who cares?
Yeah. Maybe one day they'll have a team again.
Right.
We just keep finding ourselves
team, the Battlehawks.
Oh, They were awesome.
Battlehawks.
We were going to go all out on them. Like, oh well.
Oh yeah. Well, also, like, the NFL is being sued by the city of St. Louis, and that case is proceeding. So we'll see if they force the NFL into selling St. Louis a team again.
Yeah. Don from Ohio asks, how likely would Zimmer have been fired if Joseph doesn't make that kick?
It rockets up the list, that's for sure. It's always weird, right? I don't think he's going to be fired mid-season at this point. That's the thing. But I think that if you lose to the Lions and you end the season with a losing record, which is pretty likely for the kind of team that loses to this year's Lions, you're going to get fired at the end of the season. So yeah, I think Zimmer. I think the job probability index jumps up like 30% or 30 percentage points, I should say, if Joseph misses that kick.
It does. It really does feel like this is not going to end up being a mid-season thing. You guys can put the pitchforks and torches away. Do you remember what it took for, it wasn't Leslie Frazier, because Leslie Frazier was brought on. Do you remember what it took to get Childress fired mid-season? Do you remember what those...
took all the things.
All the... And the fact
like
that...
everything.
They were papering the stadiums with like fire Childress stuff at one point. Like the home games were turning into a circus of like hatred for the coach. Like,
and remember, technically he didn't get fired for the team's performance, which should have been enough to fire him. Technically he got fired because he cut Randy Moss without consulting the GM or ownership first.
Yeah, that was the unforgivable sin.
Right. It was like he went around the structure. Like he didn't respect the chain of command. That was the thing. It wasn't like, hey man, we've Brett Favre, we went all in and we're like we've won 3 games. It wasn't that. It was the Randy Moss thing.
It was
like Randy Moss is a Titan now. You're out of here.
Yeah, that's just it very nearly took like an act of Congress for that to happen. Like it was nuts. Also, should Norse Code expand the Double Hell Fantasy Football League and make it a pay service? People already pay top dollar to risk their lives for a cheap thrill. Why shouldn't you get paid for this glorious league? Don loved this league this weekend.
I mean, it is itself a point. If there was like a red zone channel, but for the league, yeah, I'd watch the hell out of it.
Yeah, what I should do is just find a way to do that one weekend so everybody can see just the madness that happens in every single one of these matchups. It is truly spectacular, and he was loving it also because he was playing against Luke Braun, who had Green Bay's kicker.
Oh my god! Oh wow!
So
yeah, Luke's a changed person.
Yeah, Luke has. We broke Luke at some point. It really is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, let me reiterate. Good.
Somebody's going to tell Luke that we spent half the episode talking about him, and I'm not going to deny it.
That's going to make him download it, and he's going to listen. So we get one more download.
Well, I mean, that any port in the storm, I suppose. Yeah, let's pull up. Let's pull this up real quick.
The Mason Crosby point line.
Yeah, the Mason Crosby point line, which is
the pluses and minuses are crazy. He came out at did he come out positive points in that game, Mason Crosby?
He did somehow. In defiance of God's will, he was up 22.8. I made the scoring in this league. I recognized that I broke Yahoo. I have seen error messages in this league that I haven't seen anywhere else. And it is truly just amazing to behold. Let's take a look at the stat line for Mr. Mason Crosby. So he had 3 field goals from 40 to 49 yards. He had a point attempt miss, and he had 159 yards of field goal. All right, so here's the stat line. This is amazing. He had 1 field goal between 20 and 29 yards. That's 10 points. He had 3 field goals of 40 to 49 points. That's 60 points. He had a missed field goal from 30 to 39, so that's negative 15. A missed field goal from 40 to 49, that's 10. A missed field goal of 50 plus, that's negative 5. He had 1 point for an attempted XP that worked. So we don't. I love that. Extra points are still 1 point if you make it. Also, 1 point after attempt missed, negative 50.
God.
And the only reason why he was positive is we reward yards, total yards in this league, because I'm a sadist. 159 field goal yards total, and that's 0.2 points for every yard. So you got 31.8.
Good Lord, that's amazing.
Now on the flip side, Greg Joseph scored 108 points.
Don has Greg Joseph, doesn't he?
He does indeed. He was rewarded for
rewarded. Should not be rewarded for that kind of behavior.
This buffoonery. Oh goodness, this buffoonery. All right, let's wrap this up. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I mentioned the Darrisaw Hill piece over The Athletic. You can find that at theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. Also, I've got potentially another piece coming up this week that's going to preview the Panthers game. It's going to be kind of a film look at what Sam Darnold has been doing, which is baffling me. So I have to take a look into it and see if Sam Darnold's actually good. That's going to be up at The Athletic. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter at Arif-Hassan NFL. That's it.
All right, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We will be back later this week to preview that game against the Panthers. So check us out then. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember, case cookus. And we will be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.